to my presentation, and let's see what we can do.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the symposium. This is the first of the concurrent sessions, and this is Roxanne Toto, instructional designer and e-learning specialist for the College of Engineering.
Well, hi everybody. I'm really glad to see the room is really packed. I'm sorry I don't have enough handouts, but in the beginning I'll tell you my email address is rtoto@psu.edu. So if you want the handout or additional information, you've got questions, please feel free just to email me, okay? I'd like to start by asking people, what is it that you're hoping to gain from coming to today's session? And the session will not fly at all if people don't respond. Okay? Yeah.
Well, I've been toying around with different ways of capturing my video of me teaching my class, so students can have it for later or whatever. And I'm just curious to see what's the sort of state of the art is, what other people are doing. Maybe it can help me and my students.
Okay. How about somebody else? Why else are you coming? Yeah.
A lot of software being taught using screencasting softwares, YouTube videos and things along those lines. I was hoping to learn a little bit more about screen capture techniques and ideas.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was using digital link software to help faculty capture notes.
Okay. Other things people came for? Okay. Well, here's where I confirm or deny your kind of expectations here. Okay? I'm not doing a technical session on how to do things. I mean, the most technical we're going to get is sort of faculty work primarily using Camtasia. Okay? They use various other softwares to support what they were doing. But what you can expect is to see a bunch of different examples to see how faculty sort of move from a progression of just getting tablets and having the capability to do screencasting to kind of where we are now, okay? Hopefully we'll be able to share some ideas as part of the reason for the index cards I hand out, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, sort of my story in what we're doing is sort of the map that we've kind of traced. When we began and introduced tablet PCs, we started out with 2 faculty who were interested, and it sort of got out of hand very quickly to getting about 70 faculty involved in all of this. And in essence, what we were doing was, it ended up being a faculty-driven project, which of course means we had a lot of buy-in and stuff at the beginning, but it was a lot of work for us too. Okay? We let the literature and good pedagogical practice help and support what we were doing, and as faculty sort of got more acclimated to using tablets and stuff, we focused on a couple of projects and sort of bring you up to speed as to sort of where we currently are and what's going on. Okay? So the implementation sort of took 3 distinct stages. To put things in context, in your handouts there, you'll see a little chart like this, and this sort of puts things into perspective. And the left side of the chart is what I'm talking about right now. And it's sort of, there was an NSF grant project that we were working on. I'll skip a lot of the details because they're contained in the handout. I'd like to focus on actual practice of things. But basically it was a spin-off where, particularly in engineering, we're talking about supporting the problem-solving process. Things that do that are worked examples and self-explanations. Now, I know everyone may not be familiar with these terms, and they're also detailed in the handout. There's kind of like a little bit of a literature review synopsis kind of thing. So the first stage is looking at this as a natural extension of teaching for faculty. Okay? So when we began, okay, we had tablets and the capability of digital ink. Right? What do you think faculty did with it? What would you do with it if you had a tablet for your classroom?
Lecture with it.
Lecture with it, okay? And how would you lecture with it, Matt?
I would use the tablet to draw with instead of using the board to sketch out problems or sketch out things.
Okay. Anybody else do anything with it? Yeah.
Basically the same, use it to replace like the overhead projector, the document reader, and then be able to save those files better than throwing out transparencies.
Okay. So what does that mean that you kind of have at the end of when you do that? Okay, you have the part that you went in with, and then you've got what at the end?
Do you have a copy of your notes?
Okay, you were about to say
Yeah,
something?
recorded version of it.
You have a recorded version of it, right. So basically what you've got is an annotated version of your lecture as well as the in-class examples, okay? So let's take a look at some of the examples that initially came out when faculty just began using these, like the first semester. This is an example of an instructor who came into class, as kind of Matt was describing. He came in like with a circuit diagram already drawn. He knew the example that he was going to show. And then as he went through, this was the after class. So you've got a before and after picture of what's going on. Here's another instructor using a different software. In this particular case, they used PowerPoint. And what they did was they started out, oh, here's a picture of a real-world example. And these are sort of a synopsis of the sequence of his slide progression for the session. And then he shows how it comes through and how he annotates and everything, what's going on in the classroom. Okay? So now what I'd like you to do is to pull out your index cards, one of the index cards. Okay, and there's two sides. I'm calling A side the side with the lines, and B side is the blank side. Okay? And what I'd like you to do is think about some of these examples that we've just seen, and think about what would you do if you had a tablet to teach. So in other words, what would you do if you were using a tablet? What would it allow you to do or allow you to do better? Okay, and you can either be abstract about that as a general thing or write down an example of how you would use or apply the tablet in what you do. And I'll give you a minute or two to do that. And if anyone doesn't teach, pick an example of, you know, how you might use a tablet in whatever it is that you do. Don't worry, it's not a test.
Will it be on the exam?
Possibly. Possibly. There's still a couple of people writing, so I'll give a little more time. Okay, put an A at the top, in the top right-hand corner, so that, we're able to distinguish some things later. Right? Now I'd like you to flip the card over. And on the B side, I'd like you to jot down questions that you might have, or barriers or challenges to doing what you wrote on the A side might be. Questions that you've got, things you don't think you could do. Okay? So on one side we're looking at the positives, and on the other side we're looking at the negatives. I'll give you another minute or two to go do that.
Does this type of technology capture, is it static that you have a before and after picture, or is there a progression of you solving the problem in this?
For this particular example, since we were at the beginning, this was a static deal. It wasn't until they sort of grew into the technology a little bit that there was more of a flow being captured when they did it, and that's an excellent question for that. And I'll kind of give you a preview based off of sort of that little poke. In the beginning, things were very static, okay, despite the fact that they did this. It's like they were doing still screen captures and things like that. There wasn't a lot of movement or dynamic stuff going on. So is everybody all done with sort of like the negative challenges they might have been facing with that? Okay. So when we look at, the first things to come out of this, we were talking about they basically have got these annotated notes, okay, from their lecture presentations. And as, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name? Kevin. As Kevin was sort of alluding to, it's a sort of static thing at this particular point in time. But one of the biggest takeaways that we had here, what do you think some of the fallout might have been with this? Okay, so we've got sort of the beginning lecture and then the end lecture. We sort of refer to that beginning as skeleton notes, and the end were these annotated notes that had all of the instructors' stuff in them. Okay? One of the interesting sidelights of this is that, in essence, it sort of pushed faculty to revisit their notes for their lectures. Okay? And we'll get into that in just a little bit. I've got some more specific observations about what faculty found inside, that handout. But this was one of the biggest deals. The first sort of semester that they had them were these skeletal frameworks, these annotated. Yeah.
Were faculty concerned students would not come to class because now everything was online for them?
Well, thank you very much. He's a plant, actually. I gave him some questions at the beginning. Okay. The core challenges that faculty hit, and that's actually one of them. And one of them was they thought, oh my gosh, if they have these, they're not going to come to class, right? Well, given the fact that I'm in the College of Engineering, engineers want, proof, we actually did a study. And no, it didn't impact class attendance, the availability of the annotated notes. But what did impact class attendance was the level of the course and sort of the class environment, the type of course that it was. Okay? Meaning, is it just something where it's all this factual information just being given all the time, or is it something that's a little more interactive? So that was one of the big things. The other big thing is, okay, I got this before and after deal. Do I post them? Do I not post them? Okay? So there was a lot of sort of dickering back and forth and how those things could actually be used. Well, what other sorts of challenges do you think faculty might encounter using tablets? Yeah?
If the faculty has several different classes, the same course at different times, then he would have to keep track of what was said in each class, because it would be different, whatever the students might have came up with in the first class and the second class, the students might have not come up with.
I'm kind of following what you're getting at, but I'm not sure I'm following all the way. So you're saying, as far as the annotated notes go,
Yeah.
okay, that the annotated notes would be different? Okay. That would be one issue. Okay, but they're going in with the same equivalent thing, but the output might be different. Okay. What are some of the other challenges you think faculty might hit with this? Yeah.
If you're posting students or if you're posting the final notes, how do you prevent students from then posting them somewhere else online and having other students pay the money for it?
Very interesting. We didn't come across that.
I did last semester.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, one of the other big things that they hit was the fact of, I got a tablet now, right? With a computer, I'm used to typing on the keyboard, right? So actually inputting, all right? You saw us goofing around setting the computer up, actually, okay? Faculty are going into the classroom, and it's not just a question of Mac or PC and where in the menus do you find things. Now it becomes a, holy cow, I don't have a keyboard. How do I, present? So those were some of the issues and stuff. And they may match some of the issues that you guys wrote down on your cards. Okay. So as faculty grow into this and they start using it, what kinds of things do you think that could happen if you've got now sort of these skeletal notes and now these annotated notes? What sorts of things would you anticipate happening? Yeah.
Have those students only look at the annotated notes? If that's all that they want from you, since they know that you have that technology available.
Yeah, that could be a definite issue, yeah. Now, if faculty are using this for a semester and they've got the annotated version and they've got sort of the blank version, what kinds of opportunities might it afford you? Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, one of my challenges as a student in, say, physics, for example, is that you learn this one problem, and then the next day it would be just slightly different, right? Or the exam would be just slightly different, and you wouldn't quite know how to make that bridge to figuring out the problem when it's slightly different. And so if you have these annotated notes of working problem A, and you've got that saved, you can start the next class and say, okay, here's A, let's tweak this slightly. What happened? What if we did this? How would the problem solving change?
So it becomes sort of an artifact that now allows you to provide review in practice. You can go back and tweak. You can ask them questions that, force them to reflect on what's going on, and you can guide them sort of through the process. Okay? So is this beginning to sort of trigger anything for you guys in your classrooms yet? Yes? No? Maybe?
I think one of the advantages is that if I was a student taking the class, and I knew that what I'm seeing up there would be available to me after the class, I could focus more on the delivery and what is being delivered than having to take the notes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things I've done for a long time is I create animations in PowerPoint that essentially do the same thing of writing it as you're writing it. And one thing this is attractive is that it would help create it faster, perhaps. But one of the things I found is I did it for that same reason, that they could concentrate on it. What I find is a lot of the students actually want to take notes, and if they just sit there and are watching, they end up dozing off, or they are not engaged. And many of them say that it has to go in their ear, through their brain, and out their hand for them to learn it. So I found actually that many students didn't get that benefit, which I expected them to.
Yeah.
Do you have any feedback from the kids that since you start using tablet PCs or professor are teaching much better, you get much better? Because I feel like when you teach looking at the computer you write on the screen, the kids don't seem to understand it better. They want someone who over there, they want him to deliver it. They want a moving object or a human being, and then the communication makes it much better, the information stay.
Okay, I want to hold things and grab that sort of communication piece, all right? We've seen a couple of examples. We've talked a little bit about, different things that you might be able to do. A couple people gave examples of sort of how they use them. If you had a tablet in your classroom and you had the ability to, do something or create an example, right? I'd like you to use the second index card and write down how you would use the tablet in your classroom to help you actually do something. So how you would, use it or integrate it. So for example, the example I think that Kevin had was akin to, I already had something, I had an example created, now I could go back and work with students using that example and sort of question that example. So I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to jot down how you might take advantage of a tablet in your class. So those of you who have, completed your cards or your thoughts, I do want to collect those for both instances, because what I will do then is I'm going to compile them all and share them back with everybody, which means I need to know you have attended the session. Okay? So what you can do is shoot me an email at rtoto@psu.edu to make sure I don't miss you and your email of choice, asking, I'd like the collected info. Okay? And I'll collate all of this and give it to everybody. Right? So if everybody could just pass them to someone, your left or your right, whichever's more convenient, and then I'll collect those all. But what I'd like to do now is take a look at some of the ways faculty implemented examples. Okay? So along we were talking about communication. I'm sorry I didn't get your name. Yeah.
Omar.
Omar?
Yeah.
Okay. Omar was talking about communication. Okay? So there's face-to-face communication, and then there's sort of virtual communication. In this instance, what a faculty member did was they looked at the common mistakes students were making, and they extracted out of the digital content they were using, came up with the typical wrong answers, and then provided feedback related to why they may have gotten the problem wrong. So if you came up with this answer, go back and check your stuff. It means you didn't square n in the formula. Okay? This is an example of guided problem support. What this faculty member did was created the entire video, had it available in its length, and had help for the equations and proper application of equations. But then, for each individual question, they sliced and diced the video in order to provide students support on that specific piece or step of the problem. Now, because it was a different numerical problem, it was just a little bit different. So here we are, sort of tweaking them to, well, it wasn't the exact same problem, but forcing them to think along the same lines. And this is a way to get students to do self-explanations. Now, the interesting thing that the literature says about this is, okay, so you've got them not only pick an answer or come up with an answer, but then explain the reasoning behind why they picked what they picked. Okay? Now, whether the reasoning is wrong or not, okay, the impact is just by making them reflect. Whether or not they're correct in their reasoning, it improves their problem-solving process because it's making them go back and relook and reconsider things. So we were talking about, how are you doing this kind of transition in the classroom sort of thing, okay? So the takeaways at this stage when faculty are using them is that it's providing the opportunity for them to focus student attention, okay? If something's moving or something is actively happening, okay, you're more apt to be able to get students' attention. Because of the nature of digital ink, the highlighting, the ability to accent, using different color inks, etc., you can help them focus in on things that are important and sort of, point out sort of Waldo in the crowd kind of thing for them to help them begin to differentiate this stuff. And essentially what this really does is, whoops, hit it too many times. You're really engaging them in the process of reflective practice, okay? You're getting them more involved in what's going on. We talked a little bit earlier about the note-taking and students sort of being able to be focused on what's going on in there. You can help direct and guide that. You take off some of the cognitive load for the students. If you give them sort of an outline to work with, they don't have to worry about things they don't need to work with. Okay? Well, why does this stuff work? Okay? This is sort of the, the literature, the pedagogy behind it, okay, that's supporting all of this, right? But the reason why it really works is because the screencasting software sort of supersizes it, okay? What it actually does is it reinforces and emphasizes procedural knowledge and the conceptual knowledge, so you can build on both when you're doing it. You've got examples that are consistent. They're able to be repeatedly viewed when the individual wants to view them. Okay? The other thing about it that we sort of found was the fact that it not only engaged the students, but it engaged the faculty. Right? New toys are always fun to play with, yes. Right? But then once they started getting into it, they got sort of really excited and came to us again. This is the right side of the chart. And what this kind of is a close-up of a snippet of some of the projects that we did and how we built on the literature and sort of what they did in the classroom here. Okay? So in EE, what was created for this was ancillary material that the faculty member provided as extra credit practice for students. In the CE course, we had the instructor integrating these videos and using it as an actual class example, and then providing it to support the homework problems that he was assigning later. Now, the guys in EMEC were a team. Okay, there were several faculty, and, well, they just went bonkers on it, okay? And some of the things that occurred out of this, right? And this is as faculty are getting more and more adept into using this kind of stuff. Well, to create the videos, how many instructional designers or faculty support people do we have in the room? Okay. Now, if a faculty member came to you and said, I want to make a video about, what's the first word out of your mouth? What's your goal? Okay? How are you going to support them in making a video?
Contact the Leonard Center?
Well, that's one thing. But what you're going to try to do is beat them into submission to make a storyboard. Right? Okay? So, in essence, an interesting thing here is this is an example of using the storyboard that faculty had to create and repurposing it to be the note-taking support while students were watching the video. Okay? So it starts out with the objective, it goes through the key points, and then they got to do something at the end. Write something up and turn it in. This particular example is there's a problem solution that they have to do. And they're challenged at the beginning. Okay? Stop the video now. Set the problem up before you go on. And then check your thinking. This is a more forced approach. They used Angel, they sliced and diced, they put in questions and prompts and things like that, but the student couldn't go on to see the whole video until they had already submitted an answer to a question.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where did they host the video? Was it directly in Angel or was it linked from somewhere else?
It was linked from someplace else. So what we did was we created the learning object, the video resides on a different server, and then it just gets called up.
Okay.
Cool things that sort of where we currently are, right? Faculty delineated between two types of videos. Conceptual videos and worked problem examples. Okay? Out of that, we ended up with the storyboards for both becoming support materials and repurposing it for the students. We came up with self-assessment problems where students could get feedback related to specific problems they were doing. The other really cool thing that came out were the lecture frameworks. They're detailed in the information there. But essentially what they are is the same stuff that you put into a storyboard. The objective, the content, the key pieces, how you're going to actively engage people in what you're doing, and sort of proof of concept at the end, and how things tie in. What they did was they made that sort of a bullet list for lectures relative to topics, okay, which I thought was cool. Now I told you the EMEC guys went a little crazy, okay? In the handout, there's a model for how they looked at the body of information they've created and how they could support the students before, during, and after class, along with procedural information and conceptual information. I do want to leave some time for us to sort of talk about things. So unless there are specific questions, I'll sort of get to the more fun part. Okay? Was there a question back there that I missed? Yeah.
How did the faculty respond to students saying that the course was like an online course and that's not what they signed up for? Was there any of that as an issue?
No, because there was, I don't want to say complete integration, okay? But the way things were integrated was it was definitely in the C course, and these were materials that were created to support what was going on in the course. It did not take the place of actual course meetings. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was the same thing I said to my boss, and then they still said it was an online setting, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you can cheat and bring it into Angel for, you know, what you're doing and supplying it as like a homework.
Right, so we have clickers in the classroom,
Yeah.
but someone still feels that that's like just an online course, so I wanted to know if you had any other insight. Because I'm still working on that one too.
Yeah, there were a lot of challenges that we did, and actually that's a good sort of point to come into. You know, we're talking about using these tools and sort of changing faculty practice, and it changes the way, or do you think it changes the way that a faculty member would interact in a class? So what I'd like to do is spend the rest of our time sort of as an open discussion sort of thing, focusing on that, the impact that it has. Yeah?
The immediate impact is typically in engineering classes, the faculty are facing the blackboard and writing, having a tablet in their hand and now facing the students.
So in other words, if I'm teaching engineering, I'm concerned with working the formula out like this and writing things on the board, so I have no idea if you're like throwing darts at me from the back of the room, right? Okay? Yeah, the physical impact was really noticed. The fact that faculty were able to look at students and actually see, like, have I lost you? Are you there? Okay? The other impact that we had going on with that is because the instructor was facing the course, the students are more prone to interact. Physical visibility, me as a short person in the back of the room on a blackboard that's been erased 50 times, I can't see it or read it, right? So you improve the vision and the viewability. Looking at how you teach, how might that impact how you teach in a classroom? Yeah.
One of the things we haven't talked a lot about is doing a lot of Camtasia up front so that in the classroom students can actually pass it around. In organic chemistry, I would love for students to work mechanisms so the class can see and then pass it to the next person and add. I think there's more engagement like that helps the classroom become a better learning experience with students.
And your name is?
Ike.
Okay. Ike brings up a really great point. We had faculty in connection with doing this saying, I don't want to be connected to the podium. I mean, that was why at the beginning of the session when I came in and things were setting up, you know, I said, I forgot my, you know, advancer thingy. So, fortunately, Dave was kind enough to go out and secure one for me. Because I tend to walk around, I don't want to be connected to that. So they wanted to wirelessly use their digital tablet. So they could do exactly what I was saying. Hand it to a student and say, okay, Kevin, you know, fill in the next step for me. Okay? How else do you think it impacts the classroom. Yeah?
It gives the instructor an opportunity to show how things will work in different scenarios. For example, electricity, you put a battery here, you put a break here, and you can show different examples immediately in real time about how the electron would flow and what would be the different results of making changes.
So in other words, it allows the instructor to come in with a general idea of the concept, okay? And then allows it to sort of be a grassroots movement from what they're asking to create examples directly linked to what they're doing. Okay? What kinds of problems or issues do you think might be encountered when you do this kind of thing? Yeah.
Before I answer that question, do you foresee to eventually expect the kids bring all of them a tablet platform? Like all the kids will come with an iPad in class. Do you foresee it and plan on this thing, or do you just project that we're gonna use a tablet PC or some kind of tablet platform and we're gonna continue next 10 years?
It's a very, very interesting question. There are applications out there that allow, in other words, sort of like a virtual moving lab, where particular software that the instructor runs on their machine allows everybody else to connect in, so that when I'm going, okay, let's look at this step and talk about what's going on. Then when I point to Carol, I say, okay, Carol, let's see what you did, and then pull her example up, where it allows the faculty member to screen it. That software is already in existence. Okay. One of the things that it does presume, though, is that your students have the machine to connect. In a really perfect, wonderful world, I'd love to put tablets into the hands of all the students while they're working and show the stuff going on dynamically. Okay? But we're sort of not at that point. I mean, when we started, we were kind of on the bleeding edge, and there weren't those collaborative softwares and stuff out there. In fact, there weren't even a lot of softwares that supported digital learning. Yeah. Oh, okay. Other questions, concerns, issues about the impact in the classroom? Because that's sort of a high sign. I need to wrap things up.
Yeah. Can I just ask one question? To me, the faculty will need to change from presenting the problem to very much focusing on how the students would normally solve this problem. So I, as a faculty member, need to kind of shift gears and think, all right, at this point, this is where a certain group of students go astray, this is where another group of students go astray here. So I have to think more about the content than I may have had in the past, because I fill out my notes, I solve this force problem this way, I write it down. Any questions? Of course, there are no questions. I go on to the next one. So, did you find that happening?
Yes, and how it manifested itself in what we were doing in getting the project up and running is in the software that they should use to support either the transformation of their lecture notes or the way they handled information in class. And I mean, it really highlights all, like a whole laundry list of things now. But, for example, if you had an instructor who was just sort of an on-the-fly kind of guy, right, who was willing to sort of negotiate the learning that was going on in the room, right, we would suggest something like Journal or OneNote, okay, because OneNote provides, like just sort of one long flowing scroll of paper. Journal, at least you can sort of, contain it into a page. Or we recommended PowerPoint. Now I know that's kind of like a sensitive topic, but what it really does is it allows the instructor to have some stuff pre-made. They come in. They can leave blank slides or they can insert blank slides to work on things, but at least they've got that structure and format at the very beginning, but that adaptability is huge, yeah. I'd like to make sure that I get all of the index cards that people did, so I'd appreciate it if I could, run around and collect them. Or Dave already did it, fantastic. Any other questions or issues? I really thank you all for your time and participation. I hope you found it interesting. If you want to shoot me an email to tell me how I could have done this better or answer a question I didn't, please do so. And I will answer your email. Okay? Thank you very much. I don't know.